Hey everybody, thanks so much for tuning into my channel. Before we get started on championship weekend picks for the 2021-2022 college football season, please go ahead and like this video, share it with anyone you think would enjoy it. Also, be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that notifications bell so that you'll be alerted to any new videos that drop on my channel, whether they're history videos, college football videos, Robert's Rules videos, book review videos, or anything else that I might go ahead and slap on the YouTube channel. This week, it is championship weekend. The conference championship games are all being played in the Power 5 conferences and the ever-important AAC championship game between Houston and Cincinnati. However, let's take a look and review how I did this season before we get to those championship game picks. I had one heck of a season, finishing 206-56 on the year. 206 correct picks versus 56 incorrect picks. I think I calculated this like a 78 or 79% winning percentage, so I would say that that's pretty dang good. In my top 25 picks specifically, in week 13, I went 1-1. The only one I got wrong was the Michigan Wolverines beating the Ohio State Buckeyes. I got Okie State over Oklahoma right. That game nearly gave me a heart attack on 5 different occasions. My total top 25 record for the entire season is 25-10. That's pretty dang good. In terms of my top 10 record, I got one top 10 matchup right this past week. Oklahoma State, and I got one top 10 matchup wrong, Michigan, Ohio State. That gives me a season record in top 10 matchups of 8-1. So when it came down to the most important games, I was at my best. My overall record for week 13 was 19-4, by the way, which means I had a couple of really great weeks back to back and finished the season strong. Let's see if I can keep the momentum going in championship game weekend. What I'm going to do is I am picking the matchups for, I think I'm doing 6 conference championship games this week. I have my list brought up here. I'm not recording my screen, so you can't see it, but I can see it. I think I am doing 6 or 7. There might be 7 here to do. There's the Power 5, and then there's 2, if not 3, Group of 5 championship games that I believe that I'm doing. They're all in the top 25. So, and at the end of those picks, I'm going to do some playoff scenarios. So that will be fun and infuriating. So let's start with the Power 5 conferences, and let's start from the West Coast and go to the East Coast. I believe it is tonight. It is tonight, Friday, December 3rd at 8 p.m., the Pac-12 championship game featuring number 10, the Oregon Ducks, taking on number 17, the Utah Utes. I believe this game is being played in Las Vegas, so it is a neutral site game. All the Power 5 championship games are played in neutral site games. So this one, I believe, is being played in Las Vegas this year. It's either going to be Las Vegas or Los Angeles, one of the two. I believe it's Las Vegas. So it's a neutral site game, meaning the Ducks are not going to have to go to the elevation of the mountains. 2 weeks ago, they went there to the hometown of the Utes, and they got absolutely destroyed. They got their butts whooped. Utah looked tremendous. Oregon couldn't do a dang thing right, and Utah just steamrolled over them and ended Oregon's chances at the college football playoff for this year. I am big. If anyone has paid attention to my videos for any length of time, you know that I am big on not just stats, but I'm big on the intangibles. Football, after all, is a human game played by human actors, young humans, young men 18 to 22, who are susceptible to lapses of attention, who are susceptible to emotional swings, who are susceptible to all the external things besides football they've got going on. So the stats and the numbers, the analytics, don't always tell you everything that you'll need to know about the game. One of the things that I am very big on in the human element of this game that we call college football is revenge games. And this, for Oregon, is going to be a revenge game. I'm going to go with the Ducks on this one because they've got the experience playing in Pac-12 championship games. This is I think this is the third straight one they've been to, and I think they're looking for their third straight championship win. So they've got the pedigree and they've got the experience playing in these big games to win. Also, because they lost the first matchup against Utah, I think they are motivated. I think they've been chomping at the bit to get a second shot at Utah since that game ended 2 weeks ago in Utah. They handled their business against their in-state rival Oregon State. Oregon State made it a bit of a game, but you could tell early on that was going to be the Ducks' night, and I think you'll be able to tell, maybe not early on, but I think at a point in the game, it'll become clear that Oregon has got more of the motivation, more of the focus, more of the drive to win this game than does Utah. Now that Oregon has no shot at the college football playoff, all that pressure is taken off of them. If Oregon had won that game, not only against Utah earlier, not only would I be calling this a revenge game for Utah, but I would also be making the point that all the pressure's on Oregon to not only win their championship game, but keep the Pac-12's playoff hopes alive. They don't have to worry about this time. They don't have to worry about carrying the Pac-12 on their shoulders. They just got to win the night's game, qualify for the Rose Bowl, probably, and then ride off into the sunset with another successful season. And I think they are going to do just that. I think Mario Cristobal, Oregon's head coach, will make the necessary adjustments from that game 2 weeks ago. I don't think Utah will make as many needed adjustments. I don't think they'll come in with as much passion, as much energy, or as much focus. And I think Oregon's going to get them back in this one. Go with the Oregon Ducks to be three-time Pac-12 champions. Moving west into the plains of the United States, we've got the Big 12 championship game. Number 9, Baylor, taking on number 5, Oklahoma State at Jerry Jones World AT&T Stadium in Dallas, Texas. That game is tomorrow at noon. Okie State is coming off a huge win in the Bedlam game against in-state rival Oklahoma, who they knocked down to number 14 in the rankings after Oklahoma had climbed their way back up to the top 10. It is only the third time that Okie State head coach Mike Gundy has beaten the Oklahoma Sooners in, I think, 17 years and 17 matchups as a head coach. So it's a big win for them. Their defense played outstanding in the second half, holding Oklahoma's offense, I believe, either scoreless or only to one touchdown. They allowed, I think, a special teams touchdown to the Sooners, but in the second half of that game, Oklahoma State's defense played outstanding. They're going to need to play outstanding again in this game because the Baylor Bears come in almost as a mirror image of the Oklahoma State Cowboys. Both teams are fundamentally sound. Both teams play well in all three phases of the game, offense, defense, and special teams. Both teams have very good defenses and offenses that can produce if they're on their A game. Baylor is led by, I think it's his second year as a head coach, Dave Aranda, who's very zen. If you've ever watched Dave Aranda in post-game press conferences or post-game on-the-field interviews, he's very calm. He's very stoic. He's very zen. He's not emotional. He's more about, this is a matter of fact. We played a really good game. We took it one play at a time. Our offense performed. Our defense did what it was supposed to do. You know, the boring sports cliches you normally hear. I don't think his team's going to get rattled by this event because of the calming nature of their head coach. Oklahoma State has a veteran head coach in Mike Gundy. He's been in positions like this before where they've been in big games. I don't believe he's ever been to a Big 12 championship game, but he knows what he's doing as a head coach. He's been in other big games during the regular season, like the Bedlam game last week. I don't think the moment's going to be too big for either of these two teams. I expect this game to be a slow starting game, as each team kind of just figures each other out. Like a heavyweight fight where they're just kind of pawing and jabbing at each other, just trying to see what the other guys got going on. I think in this game, though, I trust Oklahoma State's defense more than I trust Baylor's offense. Jerry Bohannon, Baylor's quarterback is very good. He is a better runner than he is a passer, but he can throw the ball down the field. They've got another talented running back in Ebner and a couple of decent wide receivers. But Jerry Bohannon, when he gets in trouble, he tends to run the ball quite a bit. I think Oklahoma State knows that's going to happen. I think Oklahoma State will be ready for that to happen. I trust Oklahoma State's defense to have a better game tomorrow than I trust Baylor's offense to have tomorrow. So I'm going to go with the Cowboys again. I'm going to pick them to finish the season at 12-1, win themselves a Big 12 championship, and perhaps put themselves in an opportunity for the college football playoff. More on that momentarily. Continuing on, let's move further west and south. Let's go to the SEC, where it just matters more. You can tell that I'm a Big Ten guy because I'm just mocking them relentlessly for that slogan. In the SEC championship game being played in Atlanta, Georgia, we've got the undefeated Georgia Bulldogs coming in at 12-0 against the Alabama Crimson Tide coming in at number 3 in the nation. Georgia is the number 1 team in the nation. This game is tomorrow at 4 o'clock on CBS. Georgia looks ungodly good this season. They just look phenomenal. They look like they are unbeatable. They look like they have no chinks in the armor. Normally, that would worry me a bit. Because when you see situations in sports where you've got a team that steamrolls through their opponents and they're kind of sleepwalking their way through games and they're on autopilot because they're so good and they never experience any type of adversity. Whenever they do come up against a scrappy team that has had to fight, that has had to claw, that has faced adversity, once the pressure's on that really good team that's never faced adversity, they fold. Alabama is that scrappy team. They barely got by Florida. They had trouble with Florida's two-headed quarterback tandem. They struggled against LSU at home, only winning by 7 points and only scoring 20 points against an LSU defense that wasn't that great this season. And just last week in the Iron Bowl, they needed multiple overtimes to beat their arch rival Auburn. And Alabama had, wait for it, 3 points with a minute and a half to go in the fourth quarter in that game. And they needed a last drive touchdown to tie it, to push it into overtime, to remain with only one loss on the season. Alabama looks vulnerable. Alabama looks weak. This is not the same Alabama team from last year or 2 years ago. This is a weaker, not as good Alabama, still really good Alabama team, just not to the same standards we're used to seeing. Georgia, meanwhile, looks like the Alabama teams of old. Georgia looks like they are the powerhouse across the country this year. I may, in other contexts, have picked Alabama for this one, but I'm not going to do that. I think this Georgia team was built specifically to beat Alabama. Alabama has been a thorn in Georgia's side for the last few years. Whether it's in the SEC championship game, or it's in a semifinal, or it's in the final of the college playoff, Alabama has beaten Georgia consistently over the last few years. I think this Georgia team was constructed for the express purpose of beating the Alabama Crimson Tide. And I think they will do that. I think Georgia's going to complete the undefeated season. I think Georgia wins in their home state. I think Georgia becomes the SEC champion and goes into the college football playoff as the number 1 ranked team in the land. Let's move north into Big Ten country. We've got the number 2 Michigan Wolverines coming off their emotional and incredible win against that team from south of the border of Michigan, the Ohio State Buckeyes, taking on number 13, the Iowa Hawkeyes, who, with their win last week and with Wisconsin's loss last week to Minnesota, crept their way into the Big Ten championship game, despite having a pathetic offense with a good defense, but a defense that needs turnovers in order to be successful. That game is tomorrow night at 8 p.m. I believe it is on Fox. That game is being played in Indianapolis, home of the Big Ten offices. To me, this one's pretty easy. I don't think Iowa has a shot in this game. Iowa's offense is so bad. It is painful to watch the Iowa Hawkeyes on offense. Michigan's defense is very good. Not Georgia good, but dang good. Certainly good enough to slow down the Iowa Hawkeyes' already snail-paced offense. What's going to happen in this game, I believe, is that Iowa's offense will not be able to move the ball against the Michigan defense. There will be a lot of 3-and-outs for the Iowa offense. That means the Iowa defense will need to be on the field for a long period of time. And Michigan's two-headed running back duo of Haskins and Corum will simply wear them down. And over the course of the game, Michigan will slowly pull ahead as each quarter goes by, and the score at the end will look quite lopsided, but I don't think it's going to be like 49-0 rout at the beginning of at the end of the first quarter. I think Michigan's going to slowly pull away because Iowa's got a good defense and they'll make a good showing early, but they're just going to get tired. Maybe Iowa gets lucky and gets a turnover or two that they maybe can convert into some points, but they're not going to be able to hold Michigan back for too long. I think Michigan outstrips them over the course of the game. I think they outpace them over the course of the game. I think they slowly pull ahead. And I think in Ann Arbor and among the Michigan Wolverines, I think after that win against Ohio State, I think if they already hadn't believed, I think they're starting to believe. I think some of those young men were thinking to themselves, okay, we're playing really well, we're doing good. Oh, we lost to Michigan State. Oh, crap. They rebounded, they played really well, but I'm willing to bet in the back of some of their minds, they were thinking, yeah, but we got to play OSU at the end of the season. They get past OSU, and now, oh, wait, we're in the Big Ten championship game? We can do this. We win this game, we're into the playoffs. And who knows what happens in the playoffs. I don't think that there's going to be a letdown on Michigan's part. Normally, as part of the human element of this game, you pay attention to big, huge emotional wins, like Michigan State beating Michigan, then losing to Purdue the next week. You see this happen numerous times in sports. I do not believe that that's going to happen with the Wolverines this time. If this happened if this was like the last regular season game before the Big Ten championship, and it was in Iowa, I might be more willing to call an upset on this one. But it's at a neutral site. It's a Big Ten championship game. I think Michigan will be focused, and I feel that they believe beating Ohio State was not the end of the deal, that there's still work to do. So I'm going to go with Michigan. I think they run the ball. I think they wear down Iowa's defense, and they score a lot of points in total, and I think they win this game going away. Let us head. We've done the Pac-12. We've done the Big 12. We've done the SEC. We've done the Big 10. Now, let's head to the last of the Power 5 conferences, and that's the ACC, a game nobody's talking about because it has no playoff ramifications. The game against the Pittsburgh Panthers and the Wake Forest Demon Deacons, both coming in with 2 losses on the season, which explains why there is no playoff talk for either of these two teams. My guess is that the winner of this game, Orange Bowl maybe? Orange Bowl bid on this one. I like Pitt's quarterback, Kenny Pickett. I think he's a super senior. I think he's a 6th-year guy. He's a veteran quarterback. He doesn't get rattled that much. He's a good quarterback. He made a smart move by staying for another year because now, after this year's performance, he's going to be one of the first few quarterbacks picked in the draft next April because he's not competing against a whole lot of talent that's coming out in the quarterback position this year as opposed to last year when Justin Fields came out, when Trevor Lawrence came out, all that stuff. He's going up against another very talented quarterback, though, in Wake Forest's Sam Hartman, who's having an absolutely fabulous year. Wake Forest, if you've been paying attention to them, you know that they can score points. They can rack up yards. They can bomb teams out of the building. Pittsburgh, though, is not a slouch when it comes to scoring points either. They've scored over 30 points in multiple games this season. Wake Forest's defense we know can also let up a lot of points. 56 to Army, 40-some to North Carolina in a couple of their losses. I trust Pittsburgh's defense more than I trust Wake Forest's defense in this. If this game gets into a shootout, which I think it will, it's going to depend on which defense can get 1 or 2 stops in this game. And I trust Pittsburgh's defense much more than I trust Wake Forest's defense to do just that. I'm going to go with the Pitt Panthers, go with Pittsburgh for the ACC championship game. So to recap, I believe that Oregon will win the Pac-12 championship, that Oklahoma State will win the Big 12 championship, that Georgia will win the SEC championship, that Michigan will win the Big 10 championship, and that Pittsburgh will win the ACC championship game. There are some ranked teams in the top 25 that have group of 5 conference championship games that they have to play. The most important one is the American Athletic Conference Championship game, pitting the 12-0, number 4 ranked Cincinnati Bearcats against the 11-1, 21st ranked Houston Cougars, who so deserve to be ranked higher than 21. This, I've said it before, and I'm going to keep saying it. This iteration of the College Football Playoff Committee is a joke. They have not given Group of 5 schools any credit for anything. They grudgingly moved Cincinnati up into the top 4 because Oregon above them lost. And they beat Notre Dame, so they can't put Notre Dame above them. They've refused to put Coastal Carolina in the top 25, despite the fact they only had a single loss to a very good Appalachian State team who finished the year 10-2 and is in its own conference championship game. They refused to move Houston into the top 20, despite them being 11-1, having won 11 straight games, and having been up by 3 touchdowns on Texas Tech in the first game of the season, and miraculously losing that game. They just will not give any respect to the Group of 5 schools. And it's too little too late for a couple of them to be in the running in the top 25 now in the last one of the last polls of the season, the second to last poll of the season. This game is being played in Cincinnati. This game is played at the home team of the top team. Cincinnati won their game against East Carolina last week, 35-13. So they get to host this game. I've been on the Cincinnati bandwagon all season. I have desperately wanted them to win and get into the playoff. I literally do not care if Cincinnati plays Georgia in the first round of the playoffs and gets bombed out of the building 76-0. I don't care. They got there. A Group of 5 school got there. And I think it makes a powerful argument to expand the playoff to give the Group of 5 schools more of a fair and equal chance to compete against the big boys, even if they get blown out. Having said that, I think Cincinnati loses this game. I know, it's so painful. It hurts to say that. But listen, here's my reason why. And it doesn't have anything to do with X's and O's or the talent that's on the field. Houston's got tremendous talent. Cincinnati has tremendous talent. All of the pressure is on Cincinnati, and none of it is on Houston. No one's paying attention to Houston. I just talked about how the College Football Playoff Committee is giving Houston no respect. I think you're out of your mind if you think Houston head coach Dana Holgorsen is not using that as a motivating tool for his team to get up for this game, despite the fact that it's on the road, despite the fact that it's going to be in a cold environment. If Houston loses this game, they still finished 11-2 on the year. They're still going to get a halfway decent bowl game, and they can recruit well for next season and hope for a repeat. If Cincinnati loses this game, not only do they lose their conference championship, they lose this amazing 2-year run they've been on. They lose their shot at the college football playoff, and all the idiots who don't think that a Group of 5 team deserves to be in, they can all say, well, see, we told you Cincinnati wasn't good enough to get into the playoff. Because that's how they talk. That's what they sound like. They sound like fools when they say stupid things like that. Cincinnati has everything to lose in this game. Houston has nothing to lose except the game itself. Houston has none of the pressure. I think they come in, they play loose, they play free, they play carefree, and they try a few things to see if they can get some tricks by Cincinnati. Cincinnati has everything to lose in this game. And despite the fact that I think head coach Luke Fickell will try to calm his team down, I think they play tight. I think they're on edge. I think they're wound up too tight. And as Houston either gets the lead or keeps the game close, I think Cincinnati starts pressing. They start pushing, and then they make mistakes, and then they lose the game. So unfortunately, give me the Houston Cougars. No offense, Houston, you guys are awesome, but I'm a Cincinnati Bearcat bandwagon fan this season, man. I want them in so badly, but I don't think they get there. I think it's one of those phenomenal Cinderella stories that doesn't finish. So go with number 21, Houston, for the American Athletic Conference Championship and watch Cincinnati drop out of the top 4. We have also got, I believe, the Mountain West Championship game pits the San Diego State Aztecs, 11-1 on the season, ranked number 19 in the nation, against the Utah State University Aggies. I'm just trying to look up where they're at right now. They are 9-3 on the season, so they're not necessarily a set of slouches. However, I've been riding the San Diego State bandwagon the whole season. I think I've only gotten it wrong one time on a San Diego State pick. I think it was against Fresno earlier. Fresno ain't in this game, though. San Diego State is in this game. I'm going to roll with the Aztecs one more time. Give me San Diego State. I know that they're a good team. Brady Hoke, former Michigan coach, has them rolling, has them doing some good things. They've won some close games, so they know how to withstand pressure. They know how to win big-time games. I don't know anything about Utah State other than the fact that they're 9-3. So partly because of ignorance, I'm going to go with San Diego State for the Mountain West Championship game. And then I think last but not least, we've got the Louisiana Raging Cajuns coming in at number 24. They are 11-1 on the season in the Sun Belt Conference. And they are taking on the giant killer Appalachian State, the team that went into the Big House a number of years ago and beat them, the team that handed Coastal Carolina its first loss in a year and a half earlier this season at home. They are 10-2 on the season. I'm just trying to check on my screen right now to make sure that I'm getting my information correct. Yep, they're 10-2 on the season. So this is for the Sun Belt Championship game. Appalachian State is not ranked, but Louisiana is. So let's go with this one. I don't really know anything about Louisiana. I know last year they had a really good season, and they were ranked in the AP Top 25 to start this year off, but they lost a game early on. They've got 11 wins. I think I'm going to call the upset on this one, though, because Appy State, they just do this. It's kind of like their thing. They didn't beat Miami earlier this season when they played them, but they held it close and made it a tight game. They barely got beat by the Miami Hurricanes. They probably should be 11-1 as well going into this game and ranked. They beat Coastal Carolina, upset them at home. Appy State just does this. It's their thing. They've got this good program that just puts together good season after good season after good season. They recruit well. They know what they are. They know who they are. They play their game. Again, partly out of ignorance because I don't really know that much about Louisiana, about the Raging Cajuns. But I know a little bit about App State. I'm going to go with the Mountaineers on this one for the Sun Belt Conference Championship. Go with Appalachian State for the upset against the number 24 team in the nation. And I believe that covers all of the top 25 ranked teams that are playing this week. Yes, it does. Let's quickly, because this video is already getting a bit long, let's quickly go over playoff scenarios. If everything goes the way that I think it's going to go, Georgia wins, Michigan wins, Cincinnati loses, Oklahoma State wins, Oregon wins, Pitt wins. You've got an undefeated SEC champ, Georgia. They will be number 1. You'll have a 12-1 Big Ten champ, Michigan. They will be number 2. Alabama will lose the championship game against Georgia. I think Alabama will drop out of the top 4. Despite being 11-2, having gotten to their championship game, having lost to the number 1 undefeated team in the nation, the Georgia Bulldogs, I think when you start stacking up records, the playoff committee is going to look at that Texas A&M loss and the close win against Auburn, and they're going to say, we just don't think that indicates that you're one of the 4 best teams in the nation right now. So I think Alabama drops out. Cincinnati's loss will drop them out. So who does that leave in? If Oklahoma State beats Baylor and they win the Big 12, they will be a 12-1 conference champ with wins against top 10 teams in back-to-back weeks. They will be number 3. I don't think you can deny them that spot for the season they put together. Now things get interesting because who's 4? You have a 10-2 or 11-2 Baylor team or a Oregon team that's a conference champ, but they got 2 losses. You'll have an 11-2 Pitt team that has 2 losses, but they're a conference champ. You'll have a 2-loss Alabama team that lost in the conference championship game to the number 1 team in the nation, the Georgia Bulldogs. You'll have a 1-loss, 11-1 Notre Dame team that's not part of a conference, so therefore they're not playing this week, and their only loss was to the current number 4 team, Cincinnati. You've got an Ohio State team that'll finish the season 10-2, but didn't even make it to their championship game. Which of those teams gets in? Ohio State will not get in because they did not even get to the championship game. Alabama would have a better claim to be number 4 than Ohio State would. But Ohio State's not a conference champ. Oregon's a conference champ, and they beat Ohio State earlier this season. That's a good win. Pitt's a conference champ. They've only got 2 losses this season, but they don't have a signature win like Oregon would have. Neither does Notre Dame, for that matter. Notre Dame doesn't really have a signature win this season that you can say, yep, real good win, real good. Notre Dame's got their record. 1 loss less than Oregon or Pitt. So then the playoff committee is going to have to then decide what matters more. A 1-loss record with no conference championship because they don't play in a conference, or a 2-loss team that does have a conference championship under their belt. Which matters more to them? Because I think in this scenario that I've gamed out here, it's going to come down to either Oregon or Notre Dame. Notre Dame can make a case that if it wasn't for the loss against a very good Cincinnati team, we would be undefeated, and we would obviously be in the playoff. Makes sense. I think Oregon could make a case, though, that even with 2 losses, they are the Pac-12 champ. One of their losses, yes, was to an unranked Stanford team, but it was on the road in overtime without their offensive coordinator who was out sick that week and couldn't travel with the team. That seemed to make a big difference. But I think the playoff committee is going to look at the loss against Utah and say, yeah, but you went on the road and you got absolutely housed by Utah. Even though you made up for that with a win in a championship game, that's still a bad loss. I think they'll go with Notre Dame in this scenario. So as of the moment, I think the top 4 after championship weekend will be number 1, the Georgia Bulldogs. Number 2, the Michigan Wolverines. Number 3, the Oklahoma State Cowboys. And number 4, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Which means the semifinal matchups will be the number 1 team in the nation, the Georgia Bulldogs, versus the number 4 team in the nation, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, sans Brian Kelly, who's taken the head coaching job at LSU. Why? I don't know. You got a good thing going at Notre Dame. Why leave? And why leave when your team has a chance to get into the playoffs? Playoffs? Sorry, I had to do that. For those of you who are in the know about sports history, you know what that meant. You know what that was referring to. And then the other semifinal matchup will be the number 2 team in the land, the Michigan Wolverines, against the number 3 team, the Oklahoma State Cowboys, which that's a matchup that I would pay good money to see. That's a matchup that I think is going to be a good game. Michigan's got good defense. Okie State's got good defense. Michigan's got a run-based offense. Oklahoma State has got primarily a run-based offense, although I think they're better in the passing game than is Michigan. But that analysis will come if this is the matchup. What's really going to throw a monkey wrench in all this stuff is what happens if Michigan loses the Big Ten championship game to Iowa. If Georgia loses the SEC championship game, they're still in, because they'll lose to the number 3 team in the nation, the Alabama Crimson Tide, which means Alabama will probably move up to 2 right behind Georgia, or they'll flip them. It'll be Alabama 1, Georgia 2. And then if Michigan wins, they'll be 3. If Cincinnati loses, but Okie State wins, Okie State will be 4. But if Cincinnati wins and Okie State wins, I think Cincinnati will still be 4. What happens if Michigan loses, though, and they've got 2 losses on the season, and they didn't win their conference championship game? And everything else that I've said still applies. Oregon wins the Pac-12. Okie State wins the Big 12. Cincinnati loses. Georgia beats Alabama. Pitt wins. If Michigan loses the Big Ten championship game, Georgia's number 1, obviously. But then you can't put Michigan at 2, having lost their championship game. Iowa would be sitting there as a 2-loss conference champ, 11-2 conference champ. But they don't have a win like Michigan's got. Michigan's got a win against Ohio State, who's still ranked in the top 10. But then Ohio State's going, well, what the hell? We get the same record, but they lost a head-to-head matchup to Michigan, so you can't put Michigan below Ohio State. So then you'd probably slot Oklahoma State in at number 2 if they beat Baylor. If Cincinnati loses, you could still see the door open to an Alabama team in that scenario getting in, along with Notre Dame. So what you'd probably end up happening is if Michigan loses that game, you'd probably end up slotting in Georgia at number 1, and I'm thinking on the fly here, so I might be getting some of my details wrong. You'd probably slot in Georgia as an undefeated SEC champ at 1. You'd probably slot in Okie State as a 1-loss Big 12 champ with 2 wins against top 10 teams in their last 2 games at 2. Cincinnati and Alabama are gone. You'd probably slot in Notre Dame with 1 loss on the season at 3. And then for 4, who do you pick? A 2-loss Alabama team that didn't win their conference championship game. A 2-loss Michigan team that didn't win their conference championship game. A 2-loss Oregon team that did win their conference championship game. I think in that scenario, once again, it would come down to what do you value more? Do conference championships matter? Because Oregon has a signature win against Ohio State, so does Michigan. So they have a signature win against the same team. I think in that case, I think the playoff committee would lean towards Oregon because they've got a conference championship, even though they've got a second loss that's not in a championship game, and it's a worse loss than what Michigan has. Especially if the Big Ten championship game is close. If it's like a field goal at the end, well, none of Michigan's losses are bad. Oregon's loss against Utah is bad. I suppose you could argue that being up by 16 points on MSU and losing the game is bad, but it's not getting absolutely housed from the get-go by Utah bad. I still think in that scenario, if you've got a 2-loss Oregon that's a conference champ, a 2-loss Michigan that's not a conference champ, and a 2-loss Alabama that's not a conference champ, and a 2-loss Pitt that is a conference champ, I think they'd lean towards Oregon. I think they'd give Oregon the 4th spot in this. So it would be Georgia, Oregon, Okie State, and a Brian Kelly-less Notre Dame in the semifinal matchups, which might not be bad games, but I think the initial scenario, presents better games going forward. That does it for the picks for Week 14, Conference Championship Week. After this is over and after they next Tuesday release the final rankings, I'll be back for my playoff picks for the college football playoff. As for right now, though, thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to like this video, share it with anyone you think would enjoy it. Also, be sure to subscribe to my channel and hit that notifications bell so that way you'll be alerted to any new videos that pop up on my channel. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all next week for the college football playoff picks.